Happy Friday and welcome to the show. It is Sandy and Sean. That's Sandy Clough. I'm Shawn Drotar. This is Mile High Sports. Danny Bailey behind the camera. That's why you can't see him right there, but he's the guy that makes all of it works along with you because you're here catching the program. We appreciate it so much. If you've come forward to the program, you're welcome to be back, of course. And if you haven't had a chance to click subscribe, that little red button right below, please do that and you'll get notified about all of the latest and when we go live, plus previews of what we'll be talking about that day. Of course, a lot of Denver Nuggets on the docket today, a lot going on as the Nuggets try to find their way back to the NBA Finals after a second round exit, which is what, by the way, apparently NBA champions do now after multiple years of the defending champ getting bounced in the second round with the NBA draft over. The Nuggets walk away with Donn Holmes, but that, of course, that was a couple days ago. Now we're talking about what's next. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has a deadline of tomorrow to decide whether he's going to opt in to the one-year $15.4 million deal that he could have with the Denver Nuggets. Well, we know from multiple reports across the country that he won't be doing it. Not surprising when we talked to you earlier this week that the projections around the league is he's worth about $27.4 million per year in a very shallow free agent class at his position. Caldwell-Pope, a two-time NBA champion, but he is 31 years old. For Caldwell-Pope, Sandy, from him alone, not from the Nuggets' perspective, this is a no-brainer. Of course you take free agency because you know the Denver Nuggets want you back, and they're willing to go higher than $15 million a year to do it.
Yes, they're willing to go higher than that, maybe even quite a bit higher than that. And for a 31-year-old to be looking at some kind of deal extending across the next 4 years,
of over $100 million?
If it's 5 years, it's over $100 million. And that would be, in effect, the deal if they were to sign him.
With the Nuggets, potentially, but could get even $100 million in 4 years from another team.
Absolutely. Of course he could. And that's probably the way he'll go. He was the finishing piece, at least as far as the starting lineup was concerned.
Yes.
He was the missing piece, the final piece to a championship puzzle.
You mean it wasn't Will Barton?
It was not Will Barton.
Oh, was it replaced Will Barton?
Dealt away, and he was the man who effectively replaced Will Barton.
Right.
And I say effectively as opposed to literally, effectively also as opposed to ineffectively.
Correct.
Which was basically Will Barton's deal in his final months, at least, as a Denver Nugget. And I would guess, given his championship past with both the Lakers and the Nuggets, that there might be other teams who are good and hoping to be elite or great next year who also might look upon, even at 31, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope as a missing piece.
Yes.
Although fairness demands that we point out he was a 10-point-per-game scorer this year at age 31. Mm-hmm. And his defense, his calling card, was not as much of a factor against the Minnesota Timberwolves as the Nuggets had hoped it would be. And in fact, their most effective defender against Anthony Edwards throughout the series was Christian Braun. It was not Kentavious Caldwell-Pope.
Caldwell-Pope's obviously been a big part of the puzzle for the Nuggets in the last couple years, though. And as you pointed out, the players now multiple NBA champion with multiple teams. The 2 years with the Nuggets averaging 31.5 minutes per game, the 10.4 points per game in the 2 seasons. Consistent performance over the 2 seasons. In fact, you could put his 2 stat lines, 2 years with the Nuggets, and if you didn't highlight it, you might not know which one was which. A very consistent player with Denver, a guy that could function without the ball. Part of the reason it worked in the upgrade from Will Barton there, because Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, understanding that Jokic, Murray, Porter Jr., and even Gordon were preferred offensive options, was comfortable with that, okay with that, and that kind of unselfishness is required to play on the Denver Nuggets. So losing Caldwell-Pope would be very, very difficult, but I think that the Nuggets understand that the writing is on the wall. After the first night of the draft, of course, Calvin Booth had an opportunity to talk to the press, the Nuggets GM, and insinuated that if KCP didn't have 1 foot out the door already, that he saw it coming.
And you mentioned the starting lineup and having all those guys together, having a very expensive starting lineup. We've talked about the limitations that the CBA has really presented. Just what has that changed your perspective or kind of shaped your perspective on making sure to retain KCP versus different pathways that are obviously limited even if you lose them?
Yeah, I think we have to look at everything, and the nature of free agency is he's unrestricted, so we can try to bring him back, and if he doesn't want to come back or choose to go somewhere else, like, that's his prerogative, so we'll have to work with that. But I think we're prepared to like plug and play, so to speak. I think when you look at some of the teams that have been good in the past, they have to find a way to replace, 4 bench starters, 6 men off the bench, and still keep rolling that. It would be nice if he's back. They have a lot of continuity together, but I think, all the stuff I've looked at with lineup stuff and everything, Christian Brown's one of the best net rating guys in the league, as is KCP. So I think if he's a step into the starting lineup, like probably projected, I think, we'll be okay if KCP doesn't return.
I think his point would be centered on what happened last year with the Boston Celtics, who, of course, did not have Marcus Smart this year.
Which was expected to be a significant
an integral
loss.
Player. That was a big loss.
Sure.
It was thought until Porzingis and, most importantly, for that position, Holiday came on board. And all of a sudden, Marcus Smart didn't seem as indispensable anymore. And the Celtics had a great regular season and won a championship. And I think that's probably in part what Calvin Booth is referring to, that even very good teams on the verge of championships or in championship contention over a period of years, you're going to lose people. You're going to lose 4th and 5th starters. You're going to use your 6 men off the bench, as the Nuggets used Bruce Brown last year as, in effect, a 6th starter. And you lose him at the end of the year. And there's no way you could have kept him. Now, there is a way to keep Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, but it's a very expensive one.
It is, and that's the challenge. And we'll get a little bit more into the nature of why this is a difficult situation monetarily for the Nuggets in a bit. But there's already a bit of smoke about where this might go. Mark Stein, longtime NBA writer, this morning in his Substack wrote specifically, league sources say there's interest in mutual free agency between Caldwell-Pope and the Dallas Mavericks, but Dallas could only get into Caldwell-Pope's projected salary range via sign and trade with the Nuggets. It is believed the Nuggets do not want to participate in a sign and trade
I wonder
with
why
an
not.
conference rival, even if that means losing Caldwell-Pope without compensation, which I get. You'd love to get compensation, but probably not from a team that is the defending Western Conference champs. You don't want to send your guy there and have to go through it. So I think if you were the Nuggets, that might be appealing to perhaps get the compensation, but to send him to the team that already is going to come back as the defending champs, absolutely not. If you're Denver, you're not going to facilitate that. But it doesn't mean that they couldn't facilitate it with another team potentially, because one of the tricks is making sure that you keep out from that second apron of the salary cap. And there's
and
a
it
lot
has
of
nothing to
reasons for
do
that.
with money. I mean, people's first reaction is, well, the owners are rich enough. Why do they care if you're over the
And the
first
answer
apron
is
or the second
they
apron?
don't.
They don't
There's
care
been no
about the
indication
money.
about that money.
No, they don't care about the money. The money's not the point. The restrictions are the point.
Right. And they
They
are
increase as you move
extraordinary.
over the first apron and on into the second and over the second. Those restrictions keep tightening and tightening and tightening. It has nothing to do with the money. If it was just about the money, I think they keep Caldwell-Pope.
And if they keep Caldwell-Pope anywhere near what the expectations are, even if you were to retain his player option, they'd be a second apron team. And that's the problem. The second apron has an awful lot of limitations on what you can do. We'll get into more about that in a minute. But the Nuggets are trying to stay at that first apron, which they know is unavoidable. As it stands right now, 3 teams are over the second apron. That's the champion Celtics, the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Phoenix Suns, who went all in a ill-fated attempt that everybody outside of Phoenix could
But they're
see
going to
was
run
not
it
gonna
back
work.
again,
They
at
don't have
least
a choice.
according to the owner.
But you don't have a
They're running
choice
it
in
back.
part, because you can let go of those guys, but you can't afford to replace them at all because you're over the second apron. So that's what the Nuggets exactly want to avoid. The first apron is also problematic, but it is not so much when compared to that second apron, which is really, really prohibitive. The teams that are above the first apron right now are the Lakers, the Bucks, the Heat, and the Grizzlies. You'll notice the Denver Nuggets are not in that right now. They'll be back over it shortly enough. We'll talk more about the trade of Reggie Jackson and what that means in just a little bit. But as far as KCP goes, this is going to be presumably a tough loss. Now, maybe if there is a sign and trade to be had, maybe that's something that can be helpful because the Nuggets do retain Caldwell Pope's bird rights, which means that you are allowed to exceed the salary cap to sign your own player. So that's where the sign and trade comes into effect. You could sign him, and then you temporarily get over the second apron. But as long as it's a sign and trade that makes sense, because you can't send out cash in a trade when you're above the second apron. You could trade Caldwell Pope for picks, and then you'd be back under it again, and you'd maybe get something back. That's probably palatable. But given the fact that you're not going to receive a huge package of picks because you have to sign him to a new, bigger deal first, and you have to give him to a team that conceivably, likely, is going to be competing with you for the title, I suspect that even though they'll kick the doors on that, KCP is probably just going to walk.
That would be my
I can't imagine there's a sign and trade that makes sense out there because the teams that would do it are the teams Denver's going to have to go through.
Right.
And you don't want to help them out.
And there are plenty of Western Conference candidates for that. I mean, you're talking about next season, I think at least half a dozen teams who think they have a shot at doing what Dallas did this year. Mm-hmm. And remember, Dallas finished not even in the top 4. Dallas finished 5th in the West and went to the NBA Finals.
Yeah, and we've seen that, of course. Dallas did that last year. Miami, when Denver knocked them off in the NBA Finals, finished 8th and worked their way all the way up. So now in a parity type of league in the NBA, something that really hasn't had since its probably initial years as a league more than 75 years ago, this is now sort of a new frontier. And so the Nuggets have to be difficult, or at least diligent in the way they navigate this situation, because it is difficult. You don't want to send them to any team in the West, for sure. I guess in the East, maybe you worry about it less, but who's going to do that? The problem, as you pointed out, the Bucks are above the first apron. That's one of those teams that might be interested. The Heat are above the first apron. One of those teams that might be interested. I guess maybe the Sixers, I suppose. But then again, those teams are good. Where are their picks going to lie? So who knows? When it comes to picks, though, the Denver Nuggets have fewer than you might think and fewer than they can trade for a long time. We'll get to that following the trade of Reggie Jackson, which we'll break down in a moment. But we'll want to remind you that here we are at the tail end of June. So the 4th annual Colorado Whiskey Fest is coming to the Douglas County Fairgrounds, and it's coming up quick. Saturday, July 13th. That's just 2 weeks from tomorrow. Food, wine, beer, and spirits vendors will be on site, including more than 50 different whiskey vendors. 50, in case that wasn't clear. The festival takes place from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Live music from the Kevin Austin Band, a Mojo Filter. They were so good last year, they made sure they brought them back. Tickets are available online now, and if you use promo code MHS, Mile High Sports right there, you'll save $15. It's the Colorado Whiskey Fest, brought to you by our friends at the Whiskey Cartel. And if you're 21 and up, get your tickets today at the whiskeyfestcolorado.com. If you're not 21, well, don't bother. You're not allowed. I don't even know why you're listening to this. Don't worry about that. But if you're 21 and over, you can go to whiskeyfestcolorado.com. And remember, use promo code MHS to save $15 on your tickets 2 weeks from tomorrow. The 4th annual Colorado Whiskey Fest coming to the Douglas County Fairgrounds. They have to wait 2 weeks because the actual rodeo is in town and things are kicking down there in Douglas County right now. But rodeo for a couple weeks, Whiskey Fest. Douglas County Fairgrounds, place to be over the next couple weeks. Go check it out. MHS for $15 off. The trade yesterday by the Denver Nuggets shortly after we wrapped up the show, as a matter of fact, only within a couple of minutes, the Denver Nuggets, after Reggie Jackson accepted his player option, coming back for 1 year, $5.25 million, was traded by the Denver Nuggets along with, again, I want to stress this real quick, second-round picks in the NBA are worth just about as much as Russian rubles. Nobody cares. Everyone has them. They have no value. They go in and out like water. Reggie Jackson and 3 future second-round picks sent to the Charlotte Hornets for cash. In other words,
cash consideration.
Straight up salary dump.
We want to make this clear because some of us remember the days when a trade like this would involve a player going one way and draft picks coming back the other way. Now, in order to get a team to take the player and give you some relief, you have to throw in the draft picks along with the player.
And Reggie Jackson, because of his option, has 1 year, $5.25 million. And to get someone to take him for 1 year, $5.25.
You had to give him not one, not two, but three future second round.
That means,
picks.
by the way, Sandy, the Nuggets with tradable picks,
right?
The next tradable pick the Denver Nuggets have is their second rounder in 2031.
Explain that because in back-to-back years.
Yeah, what they call the Stepien rule. You cannot in multiple years. You can't trade first rounders.
The old owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, who traded draft picks as often as he changed his socks.
Right. So you can't trade those multiple picks in multiple years directly in a row. So you have to space them out a little bit. That's why a lot of these trades, and you see them in the draft, are always down to 2027, 2029, 2031. You can't trade them in multiple years back to back. So that's part of it. But that means the Nuggets don't have a draft pick they can trade until their second rounder, which you can see how much they're worth, obviously. In 2031, the Nuggets don't have a first-round draft pick they could trade away until 2032. In other words, not to quote John Elway, but plan B, the Nuggets are going plan A.
Well,
there is no plan B. This is it.
Every team is doing that. If they're on even the fringes
that's
of
the
contention.
Thing. You're
that's
the Nets with like
doing.
9 first-round picks, or what Oklahoma City did a couple years ago with having 6 or 7 first-round picks, trying to rebuild quickly. Worked for Oklahoma City.
Nets have.
It might work for the Nets.
In the what is it? Next 40 years.
Something crazy.
Something crazy.
The
16
Nets,
picks. I know they have 4 next year. I think it's more
after
than 4
the trade
years.
they had, the Nets ended up with 9 after the Bridges trade.
Mm-hmm.
Equivalent. The Nets ended up with 9 first-round picks for Kevin Durant.
Right.
9. So the picks are flying fast and furious, but that gets the Nuggets under the first apron, which they were not before. That's important if they want to keep KCP or try to keep KCP, because now that keeps them, they're $8.7 million under the first apron and $19.5 million under the second apron. And let me give you the details as to why that is so problematic. Again, as Sandy pointed out, it isn't about ownership not wanting to pay the money. The difference is the first apron's $178 million, the second apron's $189 million. That far in, it's not the raw dollars. It's what happens. On the first apron, you can't use more than the mid-level exception, which is $5.2 million. That's what you can do to add a player that wasn't on your roster. You can't acquire a player in sign and trade if you're over the first apron. You can't sign a buyout player unless that player made the minimum. And you can't use more than 100% salary in matching a trade. So those trade exceptions, you can't use them. That's just the first apron. If you get over the second apron, you can't even use the mid-level exception. You can't send out cash in a trade. You can't use your player exceptions at all in trades. And maybe the big one, you can't aggregate 2 or more player salaries in a trade. So for the Nuggets, hypothetically, let's say they found someone who wanted Zeke Naji.
Yeah.
I don't know where that is, but hypothetically, let's say they do. And I would imagine Calvin Booth at this point is probably calling. You're probably not going to get someone to give you Zeke Naji makes $8.9 million next year. You're probably not going to get someone to give you matching salaries, basically a $9 million player for Zeke Naji, who's essentially a $9 million player, because Zeke Naji is the worst.
Not worth half that.
Zeke Naji is the worst $9 million player in the NBA. Period. So you're not going to get that deal. Now, could you say take Jalen Pickett or Hunter Tyson or maybe both or Colin Gillespie or whomever or anybody you'd like that's on the roster? Could you combine them with Zeke Naji to go get a player maybe back that costs 10 and maybe do a little bit of what the Nuggets have tried to get from other teams in the past? Now maybe find somebody who's up against the cap. They need to lose some money, a la the Nuggets and Reggie Jackson. You can get a $10 million player back that you like by dumping Naji and somebody else. Okay, that would be handy and helpful. You can do that if you're over the first apron. If you're over the second, you can't. So staying under the second apron has nothing to do with the overall expense of the Denver Nuggets. Ownership doesn't care about that. It has to do with how limited you are in your ability to improve the team. And the Nuggets, who are already somewhat limited, if they jump over that second apron, what you've got is what you've got. Basically, if you're over the second apron like the Celtics or the Timberwolves or the Suns, here's what you can do. Sign your own draft picks, re-sign your own free agents, sign player to league minimum contracts, and any trade you make has to be equivalent in salary. The Naji situation I talked about, it's got to be $9 million for $9 million. Right. That is all you can do. You can imagine that means if you're the Celtics or probably the Timberwolves and you like what you've got, you're like, okay, we can roll it back. We can run it back. It's fine. If you're the Suns and you're running it back, you don't have a choice. But that was ill-fated to begin with, and now you just have to hope that things break your way this time. The Nuggets can't afford that because they came up short. They have to improve. You jump over the second apron. The simple fact of the matter is there is no realistic path to improving your team. That's why Reggie Jackson was dealt along with 3 picks in a flat-out salary dump, because that $5 million makes a big difference.
And just to correct the record, my mistake on the Nets, 16 picks through 2031, which is still remarkable.
Goodness.
They do have 4 next year. I was right about that.
4. Wow.
But
probably not
in the
using all 4.
next 7 drafts, they have 16 first-round picks as things stand now. They will not make 16.
No, we watched Oklahoma
picks
City do the same
years.
thing and then rapidly improve. That's what the Nets plan. But the trade by the Nuggets, I think, is a smart one. As soon as Reggie Jackson opted in, the smartest thing to do was to move on if you possibly could. It cost you 3 second rounders in the future, irrelevant. So that's a good move for the Nuggets. It gives them space. The interesting angle on it is now we're presuming KCP walks and the Nuggets get nothing. Reggie Jackson is gone. That is your starting shooting guard and your backup point guard, even though Reggie Jackson is kind of more of a 2 guard and a 1 guard's body, but okay, c'est la vie. So your backup ball handler is, I don't know. I mean, if you're just listening, you can't see me shrugging my shoulders, but that's what I'm doing. You have to look at filling that. You have to look at getting a starter. Interestingly, Sam Amica, the Athletic, longtime NBA, I edited him for more than a decade over at USA Today when I was there, has written today that the Nuggets, among a few teams, obviously the teams are interested are this close to winning a title, are interested in acquiring Klay Thompson. Now, Klay Thompson would have to take a pretty significant cut in order to do that. But we do know he and Jamal Murray are pals. We do understand that at this stage in the game, with a little bit of lack of mobility, even though the shot's good, the idea of just being a catch and shoot guy has a little more value for Klay Thompson than it might others. And who better to set you up for it than the inside out game of Nikola Jokic? There would be some appeal there. I presume, Sandy, if Thompson was willing to come off of some of the salary and try to chase a ring with the Nuggets, because it appears as if the Warriors are willing to move on, this is something the Nuggets should jump all over, even though there's a risk given the age and injury factor.
Yeah, that might cause me to hesitate a little bit. My question when I read some of this stuff today, and Sam had the Thompson thing, and I'm not sure who had the Paul George.
Paul George is not a realistic option. In fact, Paul George is likely maybe to go to the Warriors as they shuffle money around.
Exactly right. And so with Paul George, first of all, I'd say why, as far as the Nuggets are concerned. And Klay Thompson is more of a how question, but it is, in theory, possible to work something out. He'd have to take less money than he could get in going elsewhere to.
But teams that are going for a ring are all going to be in kind of oddly, when you look at least today, being under the first apron, the Nuggets are one of the few.
He is a catch and shoot 3-point threat coming off the bench. That's who he is at this point in his career. He is no longer the great defensive player he once was. I'm not saying he's necessarily a liability, but his strength is still the catch and shoot game coming off the bench. That's where he could help somebody. And the fit would be ideal for Denver, because Denver doesn't have any catch and shoot guys at the present time coming off
Porter Jr., I suppose.
Well, no, I'm talking off the bench.
I'm glad you brought that up.
That's where he'd be.
Yeah, because that would be
coming off the bench.
You'd be paying him a decent chunk of money, certainly more than Christian Brown. But in that role, Christian Brown probably does start.
Yes.
And Klay Thompson plays probably starters minutes off the bench.
Conceivably.
Or close to
maybe they split.
Yeah.
It's 24, 24, 25, 23, 26, 22.
But you would have a 3-guard rotation in some way with Murray, Brown, and Thompson. The problem there, of course, is who's your ball handler? If Murray's not on the floor, what happens? Is it Brown? I don't know if Christian Brown is capable, but he's not Bruce Brown.
He wasn't even that kind of player at Kansas.
No, you'd be asking a lot. And Klay Thompson is certainly is a adequate passer, but at this point, you're not asking him to be a point guard after 5 times an all-star at shooting. You're not going to do that. So you still run into a problem there, and you can't really improve that. But that at least would make sense, because a couple of the things we know they're missing: rim protection, which they may have addressed in the A10 Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year, and a guy that averaged both Player of the Year in the conference as well.
Did he share that?
No. Holmes was both of them, outright and Defensive Player of the Year, 2.1 blocks per game. So you have some rim protection there. We're looking for 3-point shooting. Thompson would certainly fit that, and then ball handling, of which still problematic. But this is where the Nuggets are. They're going to have to find some guys that are chasing rings that are willing to take a bit of a cut. That's what the Nuggets will have to pursue, especially in the short term. The question is whether they'll be able to find it or not. But we'll discover a little bit more, because this KCP decision has to come down very quickly, because once he opts out, then he is an unrestricted free agent. And yes, the Nuggets could sign and trade him because they have his bird rights and maybe get him a little more money. But the teams that would be able to take on that much more money probably aren't the championship contenders that presumably KCP would want to go with.
Right.
There's a lot of moving pieces, and the Nuggets aren't in control of all of them.
I think it's a fascinating offseason for the Nuggets in so many ways. And the guy who's making the offseason moves is not the coach. It's the general manager, who has 1 more year left on his contract at the present time. And I suggested this the other day, and I'll come back to it, I'm sure, many times in the coming weeks before the season begins in the fall. Calvin Booth needs to be signed to an extension at some point before the 24-25 season begins.
You might want to do it before he starts signing free agents, now. The whole lame duck thing.
He's a lame duck.
Right.
If he opens the season, or the Nuggets open the season without an extension for Calvin Booth, that's who he is.
It would be a bit of a statement, which is interesting, but obviously this is going to come to a head very quickly. We will obviously have more on this in a short amount of time when we're talking about the Nuggets. We'll go back to them, but we will divert for a little bit to Las Vegas, where tonight the NHL draft will go underway on the Sphere, which should make for an entertaining kind of circumstance there. Last night, Nathan MacKinnon cleaned house. And we have some terrific stats about his MVP campaign and what it means for the Avalanche going forward. We'll do all of that with our friend Aarif Deen, who last time we choked them prior to the show is standing outside the Sphere right now, and hopefully has not melted into a pile of goo outside the Las Vegas Strip,
it's a little warm,
where it is mind-bendingly hot out there. We'll make sure we check in from him in just a couple moments. But first, a word from our friends at Zahner Hardin Law.
You don't plan on car accidents. You don't plan on major injuries. But if you're involved in an accident and you do sustain an injury, you want the best attorneys possible representing you. It's as simple as that. And you have that opportunity here in this area with Zahner Hardin Law. Kurt Zahner and Mark Hardin are the types of lawyers you want handling your case every time. Two of the most elite personal injury lawyers in the region and also across America. They've won nearly every award: Trial Lawyer of the Year, $1 Million Advocates, Super Lawyers, and Top 100 National Trial Lawyers. They've appeared in the Denver Post, on local news outlets, even on Good Morning America. These guys handle the most important cases. They work round the clock to make this community a safer place to live. And we're lucky to have them in our own backyard. With all these multi-million-dollar verdicts coming down, you need someone who also has the respect of the insurance companies that you're dealing with. And Zahner and Hardin have all of that. So if you've been involved in an auto accident, reach out to Zahner Hardin today at yourstorywill-be-told.com. That's yourstorywill-be-told.com.
An awful lot of exciting news coming out of Las Vegas, where last night Nathan MacKinnon wins the Ted Lindsay Award, which is the most outstanding player voted on by his peers, the NHLPA, and the big one, the Hart Memorial Trophy, the league's MVP, the third Avalanche player to ever win it, behind, of course, Joe Sakic and Peter Forsberg. Joining us now to talk about it and the draft tonight is our friend from Mile High Sports, Aarif Deen, and the host of the Hockey Mountain High podcast. Aarif, how you doing out there in that Vegas heat?
I am trying to hold up as well as I can, but man, is it hot.
Well, what are the Avs going to do tonight with the 24th pick in the first round?
So I think they're going to pick a player, and
You do?
I think I do, and I think they should pick a player because I think it's time for them to kind of restock the prospect pool a little bit. It would be honestly wise for them if they have an opportunity to trade down from 24 to, somewhere in the 30-31 range, if it'll get you a second round draft pick or something, because I think the Avalanche right now are at a point where they just need prospects in their system. They need guys. Obviously, if there's somebody specifically they want at 24, similar to last year with Callum Ritchie, take him. But if not, stockpile those draft prospects high up in the draft because you will need them.
This makes an awful lot of sense because, look, there's only so many spots in which you can get a trade for those picks and get yourself an impactful NHL player. And they do need to probably restock. But they're kind of stuck when it comes to the draft because that 24th pick isn't going to net you necessarily anyone that can step in and help the Avalanche immediately. At this point, when it comes to the draft, I like your idea. Maybe move down a couple picks and pick up a second. Is there any position group in which the Avalanche may be focusing, or is the fact that they've made so many trades with picks and with prospects over the last couple of years so depleted the farm system that they literally do the old best player available?
Yeah, that's got to be the way to go. Best player available. I mean, the reality is around that slot in the draft, it won't be a goaltender. It'll either be a forward or a defenseman. But at this point, if you're drafting another centerman like you did last year with Cal Ritchie, if you're drafting another defenseman, because we always forget, last year the Avalanche had 2 first-round draft picks with Golyayev that they took in the later in the first round, or whether you're drafting a winger. No matter what it is, the Avalanche will need any one of those guys. And, as much as the Avalanche are in win-now mode now, there were players that Sidney Crosby's Penguins were drafting when they were winning the Stanley Cups in 2009 or making the Cup Finals in 08 and 09 that ended up helping them in 16 and 17.
Right.
So Nathan McKinnon's going to be here a long time. Sel McCart's going to be here a long time. You need prospects. If there's a trade out there, like you were saying, if there's a trade out there for another young, cost-controlled guy, someone like a Casey Middlestat, who's under team control, I should say, an RFA or someone like that, then yeah, by all means, make a trade and do it. But don't trade the first rounder for a rental and really stockpile those draft picks. I think would be wise.
You mentioned, and the reasons are pretty much self-evident, that the Avs have been building a championship contending team, and often that involves trading draft picks. So they don't have a lot at the present time. In fact, I don't think they have a pick after the first round, if they in fact make it, until the 4th round. That's the next pick they have. Tell us about their system as it stands now. You mentioned Reggie, Sean Barron's with you. That's pretty much as far as it goes, isn't it?
So I would say Golyayev is the other one. The other guy that they took, Mikhail Golyayev from last season. Him and Ritchie are at the top of the board. Sean Barons is the other one that's kind of like the next NHL ready guy that I would say. And I would say easily those are your top 3. And then after that, you have, the wild cards. You have Jean-Luc Duty, who's kind of ready to potentially be a full-time NHLer. Oscar Alausen, who's 21 years old now, who they took in the first round a couple of years ago. And then after that, they don't really have much else because, I don't think I would consider Eustace Emmon at this point a prospect anymore. So those are kind of the guys at the top of the list right now. It's Ritchie, it's Golyayev, it's Barons, who I have a lot of, who are all very promising. I wouldn't say are like guaranteed, but are very promising. And that's about it. So at this point, they just need some more guys that are promising. Kovalenko's obviously stepping in now as well.
We're talking to Aarif Deen out from Las Vegas, where the draft will be held tonight at the Sphere. And last night, the NHL Awards went off. Nathan McKinnon, in a landslide, ends up winning the Hart. He wins the Ted Lindsay Award, voted on by his peers, the NHLPA as well. But in this case, it does feel like McKinnon's, even at this age, trophy case is darn near complete. He has a Calder, a Lady Byng, a Hart, a Ted Lindsay, a Stanley Cup ring. Guess doesn't have the Conn Smythe because Cale McCarr took it. But for Nathan MacKinnon, the idea that he was eventually going to be one of the greatest Avalanche players of all time, after setting the franchise record in points this year, he's with it right now. He's with the Sakic's and the Forsbergs as the best to have ever worn a jersey.
I think another Avalanche Stanley Cup mix with a Nathan MacKinnon Conn Smythe, which are, two very big ifs, but also very reasonable, attainable goals. If he was to do that and continue to be Nathan MacKinnon for at least another 5 years, he would pass those Sakic's. He would have the same cups. He would have the same amount of Conn Smythes. He would probably have, close to the same amount of points at that point. He would be more dominant in a 10-year stretch than Sakic was in a 10-year stretch compared to his peers. He'd probably have an Art Ross trophy mixed into there. He was pretty close this year, second place, 4 points off. I can see him winning one in the next 3-4 years. So as crazy as it is to say it, Nathan MacKinnon, when all is said and done, just might be remembered as the best Avalanche of all time, surpassing Joe Sakic, and it's becoming more realistic as these accolades continue to grow. Coming off a 140-point season, not only never done in Avalanche history, never done in franchise history. So
Correct. Even during the wild and woolly 1980s in Quebec City, they didn't have a player score as many points as MacKinnon did this year.
Yeah, in the last 3 games of the regular season this year, MacKinnon only had 3 points, and I say that lightly. And had he had, 5, 6, 7, 8, he would have been even closer to Kucherov. So it's not crazy to think that he could have very well won the Art Ross Trophy this year as well, and he could very well do it in the next 3-4 years as well.
MacKinnon is a little younger than Nikola Jokic, and people talk about windows in sports, and I think it's an overused term, and it's applied in kind of a careless way at times. But I noticed MacKinnon this year set a career high for power play points, 10 goals, 38 assists, 48 points on the power play. 48 of his 140 points came on the power play. That's a career high. And his minutes played at a career high. So though he is in his late 20s, I don't know that he's peaked yet. Do you?
Yeah. I thought he peaked a couple of years ago. And and he came out and has done incredible things the past 2 seasons.
Right.
So I still think there's more there. NHL players nowadays, athletes in general, they're playing their best prime sport until the ages of 33, 34, 35 even. So, look no further than Joe Pavelski on the Dallas Stars. Last season, at the age of almost 40, he was a point-per-game guy.
Yes.
It's not crazy to think that MacKinnon can do that. And let's not forget Joe Sakic at the age of 37 put up 100 points. So
he did.
I don't think MacKinnon. It's hard to say it, but I still think we could see, like, MacKinnon hasn't regressed in any of these last 5 or 6 seasons. I could see him continuing that trend this upcoming season, as wild as that sounds. What's he going to do? 60 goals maybe? There's going to be something he does. Maybe it's the Art Ross Trophy where it just feels like he's going to take that next step.
He is Aarif Deen, the host of the Hockey Mountain High podcast and our lead writer for the Colorado Avalanche, on location in Las Vegas as the NHL draft gets going in just a little bit. Aarif, we know that you're busy here today getting all that squared away, standing outside that giant building. So we appreciate you carving out a couple moments, and we will let you get inside, hopefully into the AC, and enjoy the draft. Thanks so much.
Aarif. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right, thank you so much. Aarif Deen joining us from out in Vegas. And worth noting, by the way, that you made the comparison with Nikola Jokic. The only other time this has ever happened in which the NHL and NBA MVPs have come from the same city in the same season was back in 1989. You don't even have to be hockey or basketball fans to know the guys that did it. Wayne Gretzky and Magic Johnson. And you kind of think when that happens, oh, they're not at this level. Okay, I get it. No one will probably ever reach Wayne Gretzky's level. And of course, Danny Bailey found that photo that the two of them took. The Avalanche and the Nuggets have to find a way to redo this photo that Magic and Wayne did back in '89. Got to find a way to do it, guys. We know they work for the same company. Make it happen, KSE. But when you realize that we're talking about a non-zero possibility that Joe Sakic retired as one of the top 10 scorers in the history of the NHL, could conceivably be caught or real close to it by Nathan MacKinnon.
Could be very easily.
It's not outside the realm of possibility in non-Wayne Gretzky division NHL players. Nathan MacKinnon might be in that group as one of the very finest players in history. Nikola Jokic is, with 3 MVPs and
he's not
players, is one of the greatest players in history. And so to say, oh, well, Gretzky and Magic, I'm not going to say McKinnon and Jokic are Gretzky and Magic, but they're not as far behind them as you might think.
And remember, McKinnon and Jokic have been around for a while in Denver. Gretzky had just arrived in Los Angeles after that
monumental trade.
That's one of those deals. If you're a sports fan, you kind of remember where you were when Wayne Gretzky was traded from the Edmonton Oilers, who had won yet another Stanley Cup in 1988, and he was traded by Edmonton to the Los Angeles Kings in a deal that I think in the long term ended up being good for hockey because it established the game on the West Coast. They drew fans to the game who had never come to games before, certainly not in Los Angeles. So the Kings didn't draw flies.
I don't think you're talking about the warm weather
revolutionized hockey. Created the Sun Belt.
Florida Panthers don't exist
for the NHL.
Tampa Bay Lightning don't exist
without that deal.
I'm not sure
franchises don't.
Those franchises, the North Stars don't move to Dallas.
I agree.
The Coyotes didn't work. The Atlanta Thrashers didn't work. But the Nashville Predators don't exist. Carolina Panthers don't exist. The NHL was reinvented in part because of that trade.
Now, Magic Johnson and Gretzky, for that matter, had won MVPs, just not in Los Angeles together.
Right.
And that's the only time it ever happened. And that was 35 years ago.
It's never happened before or until now.
And could you see Jokic winning another MVP? I certainly could. Could you envision maybe a Cale Makar
certainly
winning an award, a Hart Trophy?
Certainly you could.
Possibility. He was 3rd in the Norris voting this year, but he's a second-team All-NHL player this year. It wasn't Makar's best year, but I think with both McKinnon and Makar, the best is yet to come.
In the idea of the best is yet to come will be interesting as well, because keep in mind both Makar and McKinnon all NHL. Makar, McKinnon, and Mikko Rantanen named to basically the NHL's response to the World Baseball Classic, which will happen in February next year. The 4-nation competition, and the 3 of them were already named to those teams as well. So I mean, obviously the Avalanche have top end talent. We knew that. The question is, starting with this draft tonight, whether there's a trade or whether they make a selection, how quickly can they get back to where they were a couple of seasons ago and be challenging to hoist Lord Stanley's Cup? There's no question, even though that Cale Makar did not win the Norris last night and defend it, he was in the final 3 of the finalists. The top end talent for the Avs is still there. They're in their prime. The key is to build around it. Of course, the Denver Nuggets have their teams in their prime as well. And we'll talk a little bit about the newest Nugget and what he may and may not mean to the team. An interesting discussion by Calvin Booth about that a little bit as well. But I want to remind you here is now we're getting towards July. The weather is obviously getting hot. That means that people are around looking for homes. So the Colorado home market's been crazy for years. I know how to navigate it. You do too, or at least you will in a moment. You talk to my friends David Mark at Key Real Estate Group's Colorado Luxury Home Team. When I say they're Colorado's luxury home team, doesn't mean you have to be talking about luxury homes, although at times in Colorado feels like if you're paying for all of them, they might as well be. But what we're really talking about is that high-end luxury service, whether it's a condo or whether it is the biggest luxury home you could imagine. You'll get the same service from Dave and Mark and Key Real Estate Group. You need experts that know Colorado's market and know how to ride those highs and lows. And that means you need 2 separate things: experience and stability. Experience, not a problem. Privately held company with 25 years in the same offices. And that means stability as well. They've seen all of it. They've done all of it, and they will be able to handle it for you. Inventory is still low around the Denver metro area. So homes that are priced right still sell very, very fast. Let David Mark give you a free valuation so you can get yours on the market as quickly as possible. Obviously, summer's here. You know that folks are already looking. They're going to be out more and more every single weekend. So there's no reason for you to wait. Every week you wait is a week that offer might pass you by. So let Dave and Mark represent you to make sure you get everything you deserve. Act now. Call Dave and Mark at the Key Real Estate Group at 720-900-LIST. That's 720-900-LIST. Or visit them today at keyrealestategroup.com. Sandy, Donn Holmes added to the Denver Nuggets. The idea, of course, is that, like he did at Dayton, can play a little bit as a center for a comparatively small ball lineup, about 6'9", but a solid 6'9", almost 240 pounds. And the idea that he could also spell Aaron Gordon. Well, Calvin Booth had an interesting spin on that, because I'm thinking about the idea they needed to go big. They need to get a break for Nikola Jokic, get him some minutes off. Are there ways of doing it? Yes, there are. Do the Nuggets have a true backup center? I guess DeAndre Jordan, but they didn't really play him. He's more of a coach in the locker room than he is expected to be a helpful player at this point. But when Calvin Booth talked about Donn Holmes, backup center really wasn't what he focused on.
How do you kind of see his development playing out? Is he sort of a guy with some plug-and-play potential for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, kind of talked about a good amount over the last year, but I do feel like you have to try to find the edge. And I don't think all rookies are made the same. I think you have the 18, 19-year-old guys that may or may not have more upside, and then you have some other guys that, are accomplished, they do a lot, and for all intents and purposes, may be more ready for high-pressure NBA games than some guys on NBA rosters that have been in the league for 2 or 3 years. So, in that sense, I think Deron's one of those guys, right? Has a high IQ, knows how to play in different styles and different scenarios. So I think he has a very good chance of being a plug-and-play guy.
He also pointed out he was, quote, 100% a 4. Now, that was thinking more at the NBA level with the ability to shoot threes. I don't know if the Nuggets can afford to use him that way, but if he's 100% a 4, are they still looking for a center?
If it's 2 or 3 years from now, he's more of a 4 than he is a 5. Okay, maybe Aaron Gordon isn't here in 2 or 3 years. Maybe Michael Porter Jr. isn't here in 2 or 3 years. I understand that. And, this whole business about the age, I think he gets it right. Calvin Booth does. Listen, the guy's getting drafted 18, 19. You're projecting what they'll be at 23 or 24.
Sure.
They're not going to be carrying teams at 18 or 19. Even Wembanyama couldn't do that.
Right.
And he was magnificent. I mean, he was out of this world, lived up to all the hype, all the praise that was accorded him at this time a year ago. He lived up to it. Absolutely. And they still lost 60 games in San Antonio, though they served notice when they beat the Nuggets late in the season that they'll be challenging at least for a play-in spot next year. And what I think you need right now is backup center. His development is such that he's played the position in college. He's improved every year. I think he can play that role for 14, 15 minutes a game. What Calvin Booth seems to be saying, tell me if you agree, he seems to be saying in 2 years, 3 years, maybe he's not a 15-minute a game backup center anymore. Maybe he's more of a hybrid 4/5 who plays 25, 26 minutes a game, maybe even a little more. It depends on whether he continues to work, he continues to improve. Also, it depends on how committed the Nuggets are to developing him. And I still say there seems to be a little bit of space between Michael Malone's vision for player development and Calvin Booth's vision for player development. And I cite as example 1A, Christian Braun. Calvin Booth said again the other day, Christian Braun's ready to go as a starting guard next year alongside Jamal Murray. The last time Michael Malone spoke on that subject, he was far less convinced that Christian Braun was ready to become a starting 2 guard.
Pointing out specifically to be a shooting guard, you have to
be a shooting guard, you have to be able to shoot.
And that's the part of Christian Braun's game that has to get better.
Braun's game, even I think in the intermediate areas. I think he's good around the rim. I think he's getting better as a 3-point shooter. He's somewhat of a threat. He took and made big 3-pointers in the Minnesota series. He didn't do any of that against Los Angeles, but I thought he got better against better competition in the Minnesota series. I'm on Calvin Booth's side. I think he's ready to start next year. He's not a complete shooting guard at this point, but I think is kind of a swing player, playing 47% of his minutes with Jokic. I believe that was the figure this year, if I'm not mistaken. Christian Braun was a pretty good player in those circumstances. And you talk about, value and all the metrics. When he was playing with Jokic, he was at least as good as Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was playing with Jokic. Everybody gets better. Average become good. Good players become great.
Right.
When they're playing with Nikola Jokic. And Christian Braun at this point is an average NBA player who becomes a very good player when he's playing with Jokic.
Definitely still has to get the shot better, but in Donn Holmes' case, he doesn't have to start. He has to give you 15 minutes a night at some combination of the 4 and the 5.
Expectation, wouldn't you say? For a guy who played plenty of minutes, what was not a one-and-done college guy, had to grow his game from his freshman year to the sophomore year to his junior year. And I don't think there's much doubt that he has the requisite athleticism and work ethic. And I guess he's the right age because 23 is too old now for NBA draft picks, apparently. And he's not a teenager. He's right in the middle. He's 21.
Right. The idea of maybe fixing that 4 and 5 is interesting because we know that Vlatko Čančar suffered that torn ACL in the international play just prior to the season last year, and the Nuggets chose to not pick up his option. Čančar is currently an unrestricted free agent. It's also known the Nuggets would be more than happy to bring him back, and there probably isn't a team that knows him better. Just an idea of what number you bring him back at. And maybe that's even a league minimum make good deal, knowing that he may still end up missing part of the upcoming season. But Čančar at 27 still has a pretty good head for the game, has a little bit of size as well. We know he can shoot. And maybe the idea is knowing where the limitations are. Maybe the hope is that they bring Čančar back on a very inexpensive contract, and you have some combination of Čančar and Donn Holmes that could then either play together, or one of them could play in the middle, one of them could play at the 4. Some combination. I suspect that's probably what they're looking at, because I think they feel relatively confident that no one's going to go out and grab Čančar while he's out with a torn ACL, but the Nuggets might be willing to do that. I think he's very much a part of their future plans, despite the fact he's not on the roster at all. But this notion that for Holmes to be a good selection, he has to play big minutes. He doesn't play big minutes. He needs to hold down 15 a night on average for the year would be great, as long as he was effective in those 15 and didn't mean the Nuggets had to rush Jokic back on the floor. That even means if Holmes has to come in and move to the 4, and Gordon comes in and plays the 5. The catch is keep number 15 off the floor and let him get a chunk of rest that he's going to get every night.
I understand that there are people for whom I have great respect in this city, who kind of in the same business we're in, they're commentators, who would have preferred that the Nuggets draft someone else. Someone else they would have preferred, in fact, was not drafted in the first round. And I like this guy. In fact, I asked a question of Ryan Blackburn about this guy yesterday. Was he ever a consideration from the Nugget point of view? He may have been briefly, but I think the Nuggets honed
they were locking in on Holmes
for a very long time. But Tyler Kolek, he's a lifetime utility NBA guard.
I can't even see him ever becoming a starter.
A 4th guard. He's not a starting player on a championship contending team anyway, and that's not a knock. He was a very good player on a Marquette team that was one of the best 5-6 teams in the country.
So he was fully aware of how good they were, obviously, and
how good he was.
Right.
How good he was. Again, a terrific college player who will be, I think, a serviceable pro coming off the bench.
Yeah.
And Holmes has a chance to be more than that. And the nice thing is that he doesn't have to be all that right away.
No, he doesn't have to be a starter. He's just got to give you minutes. And I believe, given the gamble, it's tough to say. Obviously, we saw it with Julian Strawther, thought that Julian Strawther was certainly going to be a guy that could do that. Turns out he wasn't able to do it, even when he was healthy, and then couldn't work his way back after the injury. Maybe this year's different. The Nuggets need it to be different. But you think about if Caldwell Pope leaves, and the idea now that Christian Braun moves to the starter. Okay. You have coming off the bench, no more. You have Reggie Jackson. You have Peyton Watson. You have Donn Holmes. I believe at some point you'll have Clough and Shawn Drotar back. I do think they're going to do that. We have no idea who's going to be the ball handler. They may just have to force feed Pickett. You'll have Straughter.
Maybe.
Or Gillespie. Gillespie is a restricted free agent, but he is a free agent.
See, and I like Gillespie, and I know people are concerned about his size, but he is as tough as they come, and he's a smaller version of Kolek. He's Villanova tough. You know how these Villanova guys can play.
Watch out. Make sure the Knicks don't make an offer.
Yeah.
They're putting the band back together up there, right?
I don't know that they can put a starting 5 of Villanova players on the floor. They're one short now with 4.
Right.
But the 4 guys they've got from Villanova are going to play a ton of minutes.
But it is going to be interesting because the bench for this team is, barring something strange, assuming Brown goes to become a starter, because I like the idea of maybe pursuing Klay Thompson. I'll believe it when I see it.
I'm in the same boat with you on that one. I'll believe it when I see it. That the how is the question, not the why.
Right.
I understand the why. The how is the question there.
And
but I think he would be a good fit.
You have to move.
Giving them instant offense off the bench.
To pull that off, though, I think you have to move Zeke Naji, and to do that, you're going to have to, basically.
You're going to have to con somebody on that.
Yeah, because you don't have first-round picks to give away anytime soon. So, I mean, that one's going to be tough. So you're stuck with Zeke Naji. Maybe Zeke Naji at 24, 25 can make things get better. But after a while, when you've been in the league for 3-4 seasons, you kind of are what you are.
I'm higher on him than you are, but it's tough now to look back and say he became even close to what the Nuggets envisioned.
And here's the scary part. Now that the new deal kicks in, Zeke Naji is with the Nuggets for at least the next 3 years, and he has a player option in 27, 28. And if his career doesn't get a lot better, he's certainly going to opt in on that for $7.4 million. So Zeke Naji is with the Nuggets for the long haul.
That was
that one. That was
a miss.
An albatross. And the pick being a miss happens. Signing the extension.
Yeah, that
was
never
inexcusably
made, that never
bad.
made any
I said
sense.
so at the time. That's absolutely
on
on Calvin Booth. And that one, maybe that's one of the reasons he doesn't have an extension himself yet, because that one right now, the Nuggets would love to have an extra $9 million right now. That would completely change their calculus, and instead they're paying $9 million.
Well, that's another player on whom the general manager and head coach do not see eye to eye. That's another player who fits.
If KCP walks, here's the order of money right now. Nikola Jokic makes $51.4 million next year. Jamal Murray makes $36 million next year. Probably will make 50 plus after that. The expectation is 4 years, $209 million coming at some point in early July. Michael Porter Jr. at 35.8, Aaron Gordon at 22.8, and then Zeke Naji at 8.8, and then all the way down to Christian Brown at 3. It is just
2 guys that the Nuggets have
maybe
overpaid.
the most untradeable contract in the NBA that is under $15 million.
Right. I don't doubt that for a second. The 2 bad contracts that the Nuggets have are Michael Porter Jr.'s contract, which was done by Tim Connelly when Connelly was the president of the Nuggets,
and quite frankly, doesn't look as bad every single year because
but he's not a $35 million a year guy.
Doesn't look like it.
It's 16.7 and 7 rebounds, whatever his average was this year, up and down in the playoffs.
You look at what Kentavious Caldwell-Pope projected at 24. Okay, probably around that.
Yeah, but that's not a max, and that was a mistake. But it was also a mistake when Calvin Booth gave an extension to Zeke Naji based on
Michael Porter Jr. was
little evidence that he'd ever be worth that kind of money.
Big mistake, hurting the Nuggets, unfortunately, more than you might think at the moment. It may end up costing them Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, or maybe a chance at someone like Klay Thompson. We shall see. They have to find a way to get around that. Obviously, I would imagine if there is a deal to be made while they're under the second apron and could aggregate some salaries, maybe that's the way they do it. I can't imagine there would be a more impactful trade. And that means if you got a bag of magic beans back for Zeke Naji, the Nuggets would probably consider that a deal. So it's a tough spot. Maybe not as tough a spot as the NFL is in, although they definitely have lawyers to mitigate some of that. But it is Friday, and it's on Friday. Maybe getting a little hungry here. It's a fish Friday. Pardon the pun. You get it.
Absolutely. You've heard their signature ads for years. You know all about GB Fish and Chips by now. And when it comes to drinks and meat pies, fish and chips, they have the best things going anywhere. But they cater, and you may or may not have known that. With summer block party season certainly well underway, give your friends and family that unique fry on site experience with GB Fish and Chips. The best part of catering is you actually get to enjoy your own party. They do all the work. You can stop by any one of their 4 metro locations or visit gbfishandchips.com and bring authentic fish and chips to your next gathering. That's gbfishandchips.com.
Over in the world of the NFL, granted, they do have lawyers to mitigate such things, and I assure you they will be doing their best to do so. But in a long simmering court case, in fact, originally brought in 2015, here's a trivia question for you, by the Mucky Duck Sports Bar in San Francisco, and then dismissed in 2017 before being picked up as a class action lawsuit in 2017. The jury in this long simmering case ruled against the NFL, saying that the NFL violated antitrust laws in selling Sunday Ticket at an elevated price point, being the only game in town, awarding $4.7 billion in damages. And this will affect 2.4 million residential subscribers, 48,000 businesses in the U.S. who then purchased Sunday Ticket from 2011 through 2022. The lawsuit said the league broke antitrust laws by selling it at the inflated price and said they restricted by competition by selling it only on the one satellite provider they had at the time, DirecTV.
Right. And, of course, the other broadcast partners, CBS, ESPN, Fox, all listed as defendants in this case. But what's the NFL's batting average in antitrust?
100%, if I'm not mistaken, right? They don't ever get in trouble for these things, do they? In antitrust? Am I forgetting some? I hope I am.
I think so.
Okay.
I don't know. The idea that the NFL breaks antitrust laws is not exactly
that part's not new. But I mean, but the getting away from with that part has been pretty good.
But and in this case, I guess if you're looking at the plaintiff's damages request was for what, $7 billion.
Well,
so
and keep in mind,
the NFL got off
under
easy.
federal law, antitrust damages can be tripled. So the damage could be $14.3 billion. Now, I'll tell you in advance, that won't happen. No. But if it were to happen, each individual franchise, based on just what the current verdict is, would owe $450 million a pop.
Well, this is a question, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong. The NFL feeling there is an overall antitrust exception for broadcasting. And the plaintiffs are saying the exception only covers over-the-air broadcasts, not paid TV.
Right. In fact, the statement from the NFL's attorney said, "We're disappointed with the jury's verdict in the NFL Sunday Ticket class action lawsuit. We continue to believe that our media distribution strategy, which features all NFL games broadcast on free over-the-air television in the markets of the participating teams, and national distribution of our most popular games, supplemented by many additional choices, including Red Zone, Sunday Ticket, and NFL Plus, is by far the most fan-friendly distribution model in all of sports and entertainment. We will certainly contest this decision, as we believe that the class action claims in this case are baseless and without merit. We thank the jury for their time and service and the guidance and oversight from Judge Gutierrez throughout the trial."
Yeah,
but
I do love.
But there were some weird things, right? Because if for a time on DirecTV, correct me if I'm wrong, you couldn't get Red Zone separately. You could only get it if you bought all of Sunday Ticket. And this is the trick. Okay. So a lot of this is saying that the practices were unfair because you were siloing. Yeah, you were siloing customers into specific things to work with your preferred business partners, and only that way. Right. And that's why it's held up. Now, my guess is this doesn't get completely dismissed, but probably in the end, and I am certainly not a lawyer, do not take my legal advice, but the NFL probably ends up accepting some lesser penalty for this, and it goes away. And when that happens, I don't know. But don't be thinking that the NFL is going to have to pay $14 billion, which would be, for the NFL, a matter of inconvenience, since they're about a $13 billion a year industry, and each team having to pay, let's say, even triple damage, a maximum of $1.5 billion. That's a lot of money, but with teams now going, even the Broncos, $4.5 billion seeming like a deal. He wanted to get in, starts at 6+ now. Even this would be a speed bump for the NFL.
Oh,
if that shows you how potent the
That's-
NFL is,
That's
that's the only thing
absolutely
that's
right.
valuable here. It is
I'm
crazy.
sure they're going to contest it
Yeah.
and going to fight it, but it's a drop in the bucket.
$13 billion buys you some good lawyers. Just saying.
That's right.
So yeah,
You
it's
get the best lawyers that way.
It's an interesting spot for sure, but obviously we will find out what happens. Everything when you're talking about Sunday Ticket, because until this is appealed and finishes on appeal, nothing's going to change. So now Sunday Ticket on YouTube, nothing's going to change. You're not going to get anything. It doesn't get cheaper. It doesn't become available on all the platforms. Nothing changes right now until the NFL exhausts its appeal process, and it has the ability to exhaust it quite a bit. But it's an interesting case, maybe even less so for the NFL, but for more of the idea that the NHL, which offers its center ice, the NBA offers its package, Major League Baseball offers its package, and they don't have the same idea of every one of its local teams are over the air. So potentially maybe even being a little bit more at risk than the NFL.
Could be.
And so watching all of these things kind of pop up is fascinating, because more and more you're watching teams, and we'll talk about them in a moment, like the Colorado Rockies, who do not have a television deal. Major League Baseball is producing their games. Major League Baseball has been actively looking for a while, because obviously regional broadcasting rights has been very profitable and they're not desperate to move away from them. But as you can see in the case with the Rockies and about 6 other teams that didn't have deals up until even spring training this year, that market and that well might be drying up. Major League Baseball has been exploring the idea of just bringing everything in.
Yes.
And just
Everything
saying,
in-house.
if you want Major League Baseball, just come to MLB, buy MLB TV, and every game, no blackouts. We don't care. You want baseball, come to baseball. And if they succeed in doing that, every other league would love to do that, because why share your profits with a bunch of regional distributors when you can just keep all of it yourself?
Right.
So this is kind of a canary in the coal mine deal, even though it's been going on for 9 years. And I wouldn't expect a particularly quick resolution.
3 or 4 years from now, maybe.
Who knows? Who knows? Lawyers bill by the hour, right? For the most part, those
wheels of justice grind slowly.
Very, very slowly, for the most part. Things notwithstanding. But obviously, it is going to be an interesting thing to keep in mind for the NFL, and it will loom over there. I assume we'll get something from Roger Goodell on his state of the NFL prior to the Super Bowl in New Orleans this year, talking about what that really means for the sport. But I think from a layman's perspective, and I do think the NFL has a lot of sweetheart deals, and especially when it comes to antitrust, they also in many ways have the strongest leg to stand on, because the vast majority, and I get it, when games are on Peacock or Amazon Prime, or even a playoff game is on a streaming service, NFL fans go bonkers about it, because they're used to having it all be free, because it always has been. And I think for the NFL, that is going to be in their benefit, because they're going to look and say, wait a minute, look at all our competing other sports leagues. They don't do even a part of what we do, keeping it over the air and free. Now, that's also because the NFL's demand is so high that the commercial prices they can charge are so immense that you can put it on free TV, and you can go to your CBS and Fox and say, yeah, we'd like $3 billion a year for you to carry this. And they can't wait to throw their wallets at the Zoom call and hope that the NFL takes it. So it's different. But yeah, money talks. And the NFL, nothing here is going to change in the short term. But the long term, maybe there is a seismic approach, whether the NFL wins on its appeal or loses on the way the big 4 sports are going to be broadcast throughout the United States. This is kind of going to be the one straw that either breaks the camel's back or reinforces it, so teams continue to do what they do. It'll be interesting to look at. We talk about the Colorado Rockies, and Well, it's bad. It's real bad. On the bright side, in their 3-game series that starts this week, they play the one team in the major leagues that's worse than they are in the Chicago
and
White
quite
Sox.
a bit worse.
Yeah, quite a bit worse. It is going to be ugly. So before we dig into that nastiness, I want to let you think about this nice warm weekend. Think about getting out and playing some golf. The city of Denver has the perfect golf pass for you, whether you're just getting started or you've been playing for decades. Let me explain them here. The Practice and Play Pass is for those new to the game, to practice what they've learned and then transition it onto the golf course. So if you're just getting ready, you've gone to the range a couple times, and then you feel like, I think I'm ready to maybe play 9, this is perfect for you. The Learn and Play Pass 1.0 is geared towards adult beginners. And that includes people who have never held a club or players looking to advance their game. Maybe you played and you haven't played in years. And you're nervous about jumping back in because all your friends play all the time and it looks fun, but you know your game isn't ready. Well, the Learn and Play Pass 1.0 is for you or for those who want to step in for the first time. If you've been playing a while, you can try the Learn and Play Pass 2.0, which is designed to be flexible for intermediate players looking to improve and fine-tune their game. Or if you're just looking to have some fun by yourself or with the family, the Friends and Family Pass lets you bring 3 friends with you every single time to play mini golf or hit the driving range, and then you can play that way. So maybe you can even do a little bit of both there. You can get your skills up and then jump to the old Learn and Play Pass, or you can just grab the kids and go out and play a little mini golf, and everybody loves that. So with 8 unique courses and opportunities for all skill levels, Denver Golf is perfect for anyone. So learn more about everything Denver Golf has to offer by visiting cityofdenvergolf.com. Come home to play. Denver Golf is your neighborhood course. Sandy, I wrote the headline for it today: slap fight in Chicago. Baseball's 2 worst teams face off as the Rockies face the White Sox, because
I'm sure they'll be elbowing their way in.
Yeah. This series does not matter whatsoever in any way to any wild card race, to either of these teams' fortunes, to anything. These are the worst 2 teams in baseball. The Rockies starting to put some distance between them and the Marlins as the worst team in the National League.
Game and a half behind them.
14-13 in May, and what appears to purely be an aberration, a winning percentage of .245 everywhere else, and now on pace for 107 losses, which would set a new record for the Rockies for the worst ever season after they set a new one last year. That's bad. But the idea of how bad these teams really are coming into Thursday's games, the Rockies, of course, were off on Thursday prior to tonight's game. You had done the research and came up with a stat that is mind-bending when you're talking about the parity that exists, the opportunities for the playoffs that, well, most teams, Rockies and White Sox notwithstanding, find themselves in a mix.
A month ago, roughly a month ago, the American League looked like clearly the superior league, the so-called junior circuit. It looked superior. And then plus 42 collective run differential in the American League, minus 42 in the National League. As of yesterday morning, both leagues were at 0, which I've never seen before. Separately, but both leagues at 0. Now, it's different as we speak because the Twins beat the Diamondbacks last night 13-6, and the White Sox, speaking of the White Sox,
how about that?
Actually shut out the Atlanta Braves 1-0.
They're coming in hot.
So you add 8 runs to the plus side of the ledger in the American League and 8 runs to the negative side in the National League. And yet yesterday it was 0-0, which means that 28 Major League Baseball teams, not including the White Sox and the Rockies, were plus 305 as of yesterday morning in run differential, while the White Sox and Rockies collectively were a minus 305.
So, okay. Again, think about
just imagine that
every other team in baseball, except the Rockies and White Sox, are plus 305 in run differential. But the Rockies and White Sox alone are so bad they drag down they are the absolute opposite of every other team combined.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
That's absolutely deranged. I mean, it is
incredible. Now, I'll tell you something else that's a bit unusual. 4 of the 6 teams in Major League 4 of the 6 divisions, in Major League Baseball have a negative run differential count. The National League West, minus 38. The National League Central -10. The American League West, brutal, -149. And even the Central, pretty good division in the American League. Cleveland, Minnesota, Kansas City, all playoff teams, -1. The American League East is +158, and the National League East is +40, and every other division in baseball has a negative run differential. A lot of that has to do with the Rockies' presence at 133 to the bad side in the National League West, and the White Sox at -171. The rest of the division is +170. The White Sox by themselves create a negative run differential for the entire American League Central, even though Cleveland's +104, Minnesota's +36, and Kansas City is +49. And the two worst run differentials in baseball obviously belong to the two worst teams. And that generally, early in the season, you get some funky differential totals. You have division leaders sometimes right around 0, and you have teams in third or fourth place who are outscoring their opponents. But now if you look at the standings, they generally equate with run differential. In fact, in the division in which the Rockies belong, the National League West, you can tell what the standings are by looking at the run differential. L.A. and San Diego are the two teams who've outscored their opponents. And then you have Arizona, San Francisco, and Colorado with increasingly negative numbers when it comes to run differential. So, and it's a little different in the Central, the National League. In the East, basically, in fact, identical, 1 through 5. You just look at run differential, you'll have a sense of the standings. A little bit different, mainly because Houston's been getting hot lately in the American League West, because Houston is +30 and Seattle, the first place team, is only +11. But you notice Houston's now only 4.5 games out of first place.
Right.
Houston's going to win that division.
I feel like that too, yeah.
Cleveland, Minnesota, Kansas City, all big scoring teams. Kansas City a little more so than Minnesota in the Central, although Minnesota's in second place and Kansas City's third. And in the East, again, with the exception of Tampa Bay and Toronto at the very bottom of the division, run differential tells all. Even though Baltimore and the Yankees are tied for first because they're both 21 games to the good, the run differentials tell you that Baltimore is the better team, +119 to the Yankees +90.
The Rockies will come into this game on a 3-game losing streak. Moreover, they'll come in winning 2 out of their last 10 games. They are really in a bad way tonight.
That they are.
Yeah,
and
Dakota
there isn't.
Hudson will take the hill for the Rockies tonight.
There isn't a team in baseball that's struggling, including the White Sox, as much as the Rockies have been, certainly over the last 10 games.
Yeah, it's bad. And so when you look at this 3-game series, Dakota Hudson tonight, Cal Quantrill on Saturday, Kyle Freeland on Sunday. In theory, you have to win 2 or 3, don't you?
You would think.
Even on the road? You even have the pitching advantage in 2 of the 3 games. Yeah. I mean, really? But
it's the road, and it's the Rockies.
Right.
Always a bad match. I don't bet baseball. I don't know how to bet baseball, but my sense is that in this series, first of all, you'd be nuts to bet it, but you would think that if there is ever a road series the Rockies are going to win, it would be this one. Mm-hmm. But even the White Sox are going to win 40 to 45 games this year. And they may be right there with the 62 match. The Rockies got bailed out by their 14-13 record.
And it would take a
they would
stunningly bad finish.
They've been the 62 Mets, as we mentioned the other day, in March, April, and June.
Yep,
they've been the 62.
They had their
Mets,
blip,
but they had the blip. They had the winning month, and if you have a winning month, you're not going to lose probably more than 110 games.
So for the Rockies, the question now becomes: at what point do you finally start making moves? Is there a pain point for the Rockies that you believe would allow ownership to say, all right, this season is done. It didn't work out as we thought again. And we might be willing to take some calls, or do you think that this delusion will last?
No one does delusion like the Rockies do. No one in major professional sports. And I'm not saying the Rockies are the worst team in all of major professional sports in North America. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying they're the most delusional. They are the most guilty almost all the time of overrating the talent they have, overrating the farm system they have, which really, compared to other organizations, is at best middling. It isn't particularly good. You would think it would be, because they pride themselves and talk about all the time their drafting and developing talents. And they certainly have favorable draft picks most years. But you look at their organization, it's very, very ordinary when it comes to the farm system.
I'm just trying to think.
Very ordinary. And of course, the GM headed up the farm system and failed as farm director for years, if not decades, consistently failed. And now he's the general manager, Bill Schmidt.
If baseball in this weekend, if the folks out at the White Sox Stadium really wanted to have a little bit of fun with it, I mean, I think I'd replace all the music. Every break, I'm going with like Radiohead, Joy Division, Smashing Pumpkins, Lana Del Rey, like the Smiths.
Well, they've done some funny
coming
things
up with like
the White Sox before, when Bill
disappointing, the most disappointing, depressing, horrible, just awful, depressing music between every sort of inning, something like that. Or you could borrow from in the idea that all minor league teams, the stunts are gone. Not true. Lake County Captains. The Lake County Captains, which is the high A squad for Cleveland, for the Cleveland Guardians. Of course, this is what happens when you run into sort of things. So the Captains news release here, Classic Auto Group Park, their home in Lake County. They unveiled their new row. Now, Colorado has the row with purple seats, a mile high. Lake County has a row of 8 deluxe high-end toilet seats that, in lieu of a bowl, have a big cushy seat on them. They have a little end table where you can put your drink. Reading material will be provided, and there will be an attendant who will stop by with mouthwash, combs, and gum, as you can sit on the toilet bowls and then watch the baseball game. Maybe the White Sox should have had those ready for this one.
Yeah.
Maybe there's time for the Rockies. There's sponsors for that, right? I mean, that's where we're at. I mean, that's where we're at. It is that bad. This is
Rockies
going to
still have the $1 hot dog.
Oh wow, then I can rid of $1 hot dog night.
Prize possession.
I mean, yeah, that's the
prize promotion.
That's the deal. $1 hot dog night still exists. It's $1 ticket night later in the year. Look, you're down to $39 a month if you just want to take the SROs for all you can eat Rockies games. We shall see. Either way, one of these teams will win the series, but who loses? You, the baseball fan. Congratulations. Enjoy the weekend. Right. Yeah. That one's probably okay. Find a good WNBA game. There's a couple real good ones this weekend. Much more entertaining. Another one of these days, we'll talk about why Denver doesn't have one. Get on the stick, KC.
You brought that up before.
You guys can have one whenever you want one.
You're the campaign director.
Yeah, just get on it. I mean, come on here. You get a little something going there. It's not going to be that hard to compete with the Rockies.
Double hat day.
Double hat day. First time ever. See, we coordinated. We actually didn't. It was purely coincidental. But I was celebrating the University of Colorado's number 16 ranking in the upcoming EA College Football 25 game. We'll probably get into that a little closer to launch, because Sandy's look is what most people are thinking right now. But we'll talk about that another day.
36 was high.
Yeah, well, hey, you never know. Things, it becomes interesting up there in Boulder. We'll talk about them soon enough as well. Thanks to Danny Bailey. He's the one that makes all of this work. It's the reason you can see everything. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and poke that little red button below you. It says subscribe if you haven't already. We would appreciate it, and you'll get notified whenever not only we go live, but you'll also know what we'll be talking about before the show starts. So we appreciate everyone who's done that as well. However you listen to the show, we really appreciate it. Enjoy this first weekend. July is upon us. Be safe. Take a little time and get outside as much as you can, but wear that sunscreen, because it's supposed to be toasty. We will be back in a bit. For Sandy Clough, I'm Shawn Drotar. Be safe. Have fun. We want you back here on Mile High Sports.